The kids doing? This question I came across in my study of Otto Wagner, the Austrian architect of the late 19th century. I've spoken about this in the past. I'm going to explain why I'm so interested in Otto Wagner and why he becomes very often subject of this podcast. But one of the questions during my studies recently that came up was, what are the kids doing? And I want to talk a little bit about this. What this really means is, what is the new generation actually doing? What's happening? What should we expect in the next 10 to 15 years from our leaders, from the leadership that is coming from this new generation? This is a Not Even Wrong podcast. It's May 12th, 2021. This is Krim Delko. Since the last update on May 10th, we are down 4.6%. The market is down roughly 3%. For the year, we are now down 20.3%. The market is up 7%. We're underperforming by 27.3%. This is the largest underperformance we've had. It is not the worst absolute performance we've had this year. We've actually had even a worse number about a month and a half ago. Let me quickly explain what's happening in the market. We have high inflation numbers today. Inflation means potentially either higher interest rates or the Fed moving to move higher interest rates. Either way, it is a concern to the market. Inflation also has practical negative implications, such as supply chain issues. Lots of car companies cannot deliver cars. Things like that are happening. I think overall, what we believe at Orange Capital Partners, there's also a fundamental problem in the economy that the people are, plain and simply said, lazy, complacent. It's happening across the economy. Let's say I've had recent interactions with the medical community. It's just everything is slow and people are not working. People are working from home, but working from home is not working like it used to be. It is just not the same intensity. There is not the same commitment. I think it's psychological. If you leave the home in the morning and you go to the office, you are in the mindset of work. And if you don't do that, then you're just not in the mindset of work. And it becomes more of a mindset of, I'm at home and I have to do this thing that pays my bills, which is called work. I don't know how this is going to transition. I hope it's going to change. I hope we will find a new type of intensity and competitiveness that we've had in the past. I've seen this on many levels now. My son's soccer, my son's school, the hedge fund business. All these things are becoming very sort of loose, and there's just a lack of intensity, and that creates inflation because we have less production, we have more demand, also we have money printing, so there's no recession, and that combines to inflation. Inflation is bad for the markets. I think in the short term. In the long term, inflation is fine. Even if we have inflation, the markets will catch up with that and deliver higher returns, maybe in nominal terms at least, maybe not in real terms. But anyway, in the short term, I think it's a problem. We are down 20% for the year, and we feel that that is probably not the end, that we can have another 5-6% drawdown. And then at that point, we believe that we will have a strong rebound, because there is always this wake-up call, this also flush out in the markets. I think as our stocks are concerned, also we believe that we have this, like I discussed on Monday, this news that Cathie Wood had some business dealings with one of those funds that blew up, and there's just some front running there, and no wonder we are down roughly 10% since that news came out. I think there's just this front running, and we believe that there will be a very sharp snapback once that front running is over. Now, let's get to the topic of today's podcast, and this is Otto Wagner and his attitude towards the young. Let me give you a little bit of an overview. So we're in the late 19th century, and Vienna is the center of industry and the new aristocracy, which is the industrial aristocracy. And this is the main reason why I like this topic, because it is Otto Wagner is an architect of a time when things were changing, in particular when the industrial world was becoming real, and the law and the sort of the code, meaning relying on law and code versus relying on superstition and old habits and the feudalist monarch state. That was the transition, and Vienna is the architectural manifestation of that transition. So I'm drawing the arc of today until into today's time, when we have, I think, the crumbling of this code and the law and the government and the democracies as we know them into a more decentralized, consensus-driven world, which manifests itself in the Bitcoin and Ethereum blockchain technologies. I think this is going to become the new fundamental underpin of the global economy. Hopefully also Algorand will take part of that. But we believe that a lot of the interactions with people can be organized in an algorithmic way through smart contracts. And this is the key. And we believe, we are curious about how this will manifest itself, let's say, in architecture, in lifestyles, in things like that. So one thing that I've spoken about in the past is that you can look at the art world and kind of get a glimpse of what's happening there, because the art world is always sensitive to these types of movements, and maybe they're not naming it by name, but you will feel a certain representation. This is exactly what Otto Wagner did in his time. I had an episode about Gustav Klimt, who was sort of throwing away this old classic establishment in painting towards a new modern or pre-modern type of expression. And that's why also this question, what are the kids doing? What it really means is, what are the new trends? What are young people doing? The young people will eventually decide what's up, because no matter, even if they're renegades now, even if they're now young and there's still an old guard that rules, the young people will become the old guard. So whatever they think and do, their culture will prevail. And therefore it is important to think about that. And what happened in the late 19th century was the so-called secession in Vienna, which was basically that a lot of young artists, architects, etc., they turned their backs towards classic old style forms of expression towards new styles of expression. One of them is Jugendstil, my favorite style that is also visible in Switzerland, where I grew up, particularly in Davos, my favorite place in Switzerland, where I often go even now when I'm in Switzerland. It's a small village up in the mountains, but it has a certain appeal, a certain positive energy, a certain um, optimistic view of the world that is expressed through the architecture. Not just that, but also expressed to uh, people like Klee and Thomas Mann, who have practiced there, lived there. Now, Thomas Mann, probably it would be pretty head scratching to call him an optimistic author. But nevertheless, I think reading Thomas Mann and walking on my many walks when I'm in Davos, and there's actually even a small path up in the hills around Davos where it's called Thomas Mann Weg or something like that, the Thomas Mann path. So I walk around there, imagining him walking around there, thinking, writing his book, particularly The Magic Mountain, which actually plays in Davos. So anyway, I think the thought of him as being an optimistic author is probably a bit of a far stretch, but he gives me hope, he gives me optimism, particularly after I read Dr. Faustus. I feel like, yes, it is very sinister to think about a time when, let's say, you want to trade genius for your soul. And that's the topic in Dr. Faustus, and the idea of, are you as a genius even allowed to live? Should you be living? Are you part of the human race? Are you contributing, or are you sucking from the human? Are you the devil? Things like that. And nevertheless, it gives me hope, because I think once I reconcile those thoughts, I can find my own conclusion, which is that genius and performance and progress, or to use David Deutsch's words, explanatory knowledge in the arts as much as in science and business, is the only way forward. And we have to find a way to keep that, driving that, even if we sometimes maybe have to do a little bit of a Faustian bargain, that might be the case. But it is still, as long as you have right and wrong, as long as your compass is such that at least for yourself, you always know when to do the right thing for yourself. I'm saying it's a subjective right thing, but at least as if you have that, you will bear yourself from being insane and having problems and ending up in the magic mountain. So I think, therefore, it is optimistic. And now let me get back to Jugendstil. Jugendstil, I think the reason I feel optimistic about life in general when I'm in Davos is because I'm inspired by the Jugendstil architecture. And the Jugendstil architecture was a break of the old towards the new, which was a good thing. And most people thought it was a good thing. And I even think today it was a good thing to break away from the absolute monarch state towards a more legalized, lawyer-driven, financier-driven, doctor-driven type society, a society that we live in today. Now, today we are, I think, seeing the limits of that society. In particular, for example, the woke movement, the idea that we can't talk freely anymore about things because there will always be somebody sensitive about topics and offended about things. So we're starting to scratch at the freedom of speech. We're starting to scratch at the freedom of expression. We're even scratching at the freedom of meeting together and talking in terms of we could be recognized as some sort of terror group if we just meet and talk about, let's say, the necessity to get back to values. We cannot question things like whatever the moment is right now. You cannot question it. It's becoming more difficult. So I'm thinking this is a sign that this liberal democracy that was just starting to flourish in the late 19th century, and Otto Wagner was the manifestation of that kind of trend, that we're seeing that type of democracy, liberal democracy, the rule of law, all these things crumbling under its own weight. And the woke movement is just one sort of manifestation of that. There's other manifestations also. The right-wing manifestations are certainly not very encouraging. And the hope is that we have a new alternative, and that will be the decentralized world based on blockchain technologies. That doesn't answer many questions. One of them, of course, is the woke movement being also an expression of economically underprivileged people who just want more power and more money. And the decentralized world on the blockchain technology will make it even worse for them to get that money, because the rich will be able to avoid having their money taken away and redistributed to other people. So it doesn't solve problems. I think we are still at a fragile part of our times, and the only hope is that we, through in decentralized blockchain technology, can find new ways to organize ourselves, and of course through relentless innovation also can drive the economy and drive inflation down by bringing value to the marketplace, value in terms of better products at lower prices. So to summarize this episode, again, the question, what are the young doing? Actually, this is not a summary. I'm still in the midst of it. What are the young doing? And I think there are some things that I am very much opposed to. For example, like I said, the woke movement, which is fine. I think everybody should express their opinion. But I feel like a lot of young people are just trying to keep responsibility away from them and having opinions without paying the price. This is the main problem of today's time, particularly in the United States, which is people have opinions without being ready to take accountability or pay the price for whatever opinion they have. For example, I recently met a young medical student who said he wants to help the poor. When I asked him, okay, how much do you expect to make? He said, well, I expect to make about $500,000 as a doctor. I said, well, then why don't you take 80% of that money and redistribute that money to the poor if you really want to help the poor? Of course, I just got a fancy look from his side. What they really want to do, these young people, is take the money away from the rich and redistribute it to the poor, but not actually pay anything themselves. This is the problem. And I think this is something I have to take seriously. It's not all the young people, but it's part of the young generation. Another thing that the young generation is doing is this idea that you can have meme stocks. For example, now this is very close to home in the marketplace where I operate. Meme stocks are stocks that just go up because you want them to go up. Such same thing with Dogecoin and other coins that just because you tweet them up, they go up and things like that. Again, something I despise, but I want to take it seriously. I want to look at it and try to analyze it in a more sort of detached way. What do these things mean? And I think if I really go to the ground of it, if I really think of it sort of in a Socratean way, trying to go back to first principles and start building up, okay, why would somebody who has been privileged, let's say this person I spoke with, this medical student, he's been very privileged in his life. I think went mostly to private schools, and if not, then definitely lived in neighborhoods where the public schools didn't have any issues of inner city problems and stuff like that. So very privileged upbringing, and then you get to the point where you yourself can become part of the establishment. You accept that, particularly the high salary, but then you want everybody else to chip in to help the poor. Where is that coming from? What exactly does that mean? And I feel there's a couple of explanations. One is hypocrisy. That's always an explanation. One is jealousy, which is usually my approach to these things is you can only be like that if you haven't achieved what you think you deserve. So you become jealous of the people around you that have achieved more, and you just want to take away their wealth, for example. So those are sort of the main driving vectors, I think, in society today is the lack of accountability, but still the desire to rule and change things. And also, I think a lot of people have the spread between what their expectations are and what reality actually offers them is widening, which creates frustrations. I think those are the main contributors of frustrations and problems again, I'm talking about the US society here. So what does that now mean for the question, what are the young doing? The young are doing what, if I'm right, and they are frustrated, and in particular also have very high expectations relative to their abilities, a lot of them, not all of them, that we will see a culture war. We will see something like we had in the 60s of the last century. People going to the street, we already see that. I think the woke movement is just a disguised attempt to undermine democracy, because democracy is just a manifestation of the free market. The free market benefits the stronger people as to the cost of the weaker people, weaker in a sense, less able to participate in the marketplace. And the woke movement is an attempt to stop that. Now we, of course, the Orange Capital Partners are opposed to that, because we have based our career and our existence and our beliefs and our value system is based on the free market, or David Deutschian explanatory power, and the Popperian constant criticism of ideas, products, services, anything knowledge has to be criticized against what we can come up with as our best effort today, in terms of trying to explain something and then finding better explanations, or in the case of business, better products and services. So what are the young doing? To summarize, the young are doing what they're supposed to be doing if they are frustrated because their expectations are much higher than what reality has to offer them. And that is a picture of society I don't like. Not everything is always positive in this podcast. The outcomes here could be a culture war. They could be even worse. We could have an inflationary period with very, very disastrous economic consequences. These are all possible outcomes. We hope that that's not the case. We hope that we will have deflationary power in the economy through innovation, and that the digitization of life sciences, the decarbonization of transport, and the decarbonization of the utility infrastructure and energy infrastructure in general will drive so much value that it can overcome these troubles that we see coming from the question, okay, what are the kids doing? Thank you.